I never thought betrayal would come wrapped in silk smiles and champagne toasts, but that's exactly how it happened. My name is Margaret Harrison, and I am 72 years old. For most of my life, I believed in family, the way some people believe in God with absolute faith. I built my world around my son David, and when my husband Robert died, leaving me the empire he had worked his entire life to build, I told myself that at least David and his wife Vanessa would be my anchor in the storm. But anchors can rust, and storms can reveal the rot you never wanted to see. It was a Tuesday morning, perfectly ordinary, when David called me. He never called directly anymore, always through assistants, always through cold-clipped emails. But that day his voice was warm, affectionate, even as he invited me to a celebration cruise on their yacht. Just the three of us, mom-like family should be. We want to toast your recovery. My heart swelled with hope. For months I had felt the distance growing, their eyes colder, their visits shorter, their words edged with impatience. I thought perhaps this was their way of coming back to me, of saying we still mattered. I dressed carefully that morning, slipping into the navy dress Robert always said made my eyes glow. As the taxi pulled into the marina, I whispered a small prayer that maybe, just maybe, I was wrong about the distance, that love could still mend what grief had frayed. The yacht gleamed in the sunlight, 42 feet of sleek white luxury, bought, I later realized, with the very money I had given them to invest in David's firm. Vanessa stood on deck, her smile sharp as broken glass. David hugged me at the dock, but it was staged, his arms rigid, his scent of expensive cologne doing little to hide the chill in his chest. We sailed into open waters, the coastline shrinking behind us, the ocean glittering with promise. For an hour it was almost pleasant mimosas, small talk, the salty wind in my hair. But soon the questions began. Mom, have you thought about updating your will? Probate can be such a nightmare. Maybe we should simplify things. David's tone was casual, but his eyes never left mine. Vanessa, meanwhile, kept angling her phone as if she were taking selfies, yet always catching me in the corner of her lens, recording me as I drank, as I spoke. It hit me then like ice down my spine. They were building evidence. Evidence that I was confused, incompetent, perhaps slipping into dementia. Suddenly, every strange moment of the past months made sense. The misplaced documents, the power of attorney they'd urged me to sign after my surgery, the financial advisor who had stopped returning my calls. I set down my glass. David, I want to go back to shore. That was when the mask fell. His voice hardened, stripped of all pretense. I'm afraid that's not possible, Mom. We need to talk about your health, about your memory issues. My memory is fine, I snapped. But Vanessa stepped closer, her smile widening. We have it documented. Doctors agree. You're no longer capable of managing your affairs. I stood slowly, my hip aching, but my mind sharp as ever. And if I refuse? Vanessa leaned in her breath, brushing my ear. Say hi to the sharks. And with one deceptively gentle shove, I was overboard, the cold Atlantic swallowing me whole. The shock of the water was like knives stealing my breath, dragging me under. I kicked free of my shoes, fought the weight of my clothes, and clawed toward the surface. The yacht was already pulling away, its engines roaring. For a moment, I saw David leaning over the rail, his face twisted in something that might have been fake horror. And beside him, Vanessa was on the phone, her voice calm, clinical. Yes, file the petition first thing Monday. She's not competent. Yes, she drowned. That was it. Their plan wasn't just betrayal, it was execution. But fate, or perhaps Robert's spirit, had other designs. Through the haze of salt water and terror, I saw another boat, a weathered fishing vessel, cutting through the waves. Its captain, Jake Morrison, and his teenage grandson, Tyler, hauled me aboard, shivering, coughing seawater, trembling with shock. Jake wrapped me in an oil-scented blanket, his weathered eyes filled with concern. What happened, lady? My family! I gasped, teeth chattering. They left me. They want my money. Jake's jaw tightened, his gaze darkening. The kind who inherit billions if you don't make it back. I've seen men gut fish cleaner than that. The Coast Guard was only a radio call away, but panic surged through me. Don't tell them, I pleaded, clutching Jake's arm. Please don't let anyone know I survived. Not yet. He studied me, saw the fire beneath the fear, and finally nodded. Then we'll do this off the books. As the fishing boat carried me toward a hidden dock, I felt something stir within me. The woman they had tried to kill had drowned in those waves. What emerged, shivering but alive, was something harder, sharper. They thought they had killed me. They thought $3 billion had bought them freedom. But I was alive and I was coming for them. Jake's dock was a narrow slip of weathered wood tucked behind a wall of reeds, the kind of place only locals knew. Tyler helped me onto solid ground, his young hands steady where my knees still shook. I thanked them both, though my voice cracked under the weight of what had just happened. Inside Jake's shack, the air smelled of brine and coffee grounds. He draped another blanket over my shoulders and poured steaming liquid into a chipped mug. "Drink," he said. "Heat first, then plans." I stared at the cup, my hands trembling. "They think I'm dead," I whispered. "Then let's keep it that way," Jake replied, settling across from me. His eyes, pale blue and sharp, studied me with a mix of suspicion and respect. "What's your name?" "Margaret Harrison." His brows rose, as in Harrison Global, the shipping fortune. I closed my eyes. Yes, my husband built it. I safeguarded it. My son and his wife just tried to kill me for it. The words tasted bitter, but saying them out loud felt like slicing a chain. Jake leaned back, whistling low. 3 billion reasons for treachery. Lady, you're swimming in sharks and not the ones in the water. Tyler shifted nervously, glancing at his grandfather. "Should we call the police?" Jake shook his head. "Cops'll file it, maybe leak it. If her family's got lawyers and money, they'll twist the story till she's the crazy one. Ain't that right?" I nodded, the memory of Vanessa's smug voice echoing. "Doctors agree. You're no longer capable." Jake leaned forward. "So what do you want Margaret to hide, to run, or to fight?" I felt something ignite inside me. Something that had been buried under years of politeness, years of letting others dictate the terms of my life. "Fight," I said, my voice firm, but not recklessly. They have power. They have papers. If I show up on their doorstep screaming, I'll look exactly like the unhinged woman they've painted me to be. Jake's grin was grim. "Good. You've got sense. Fighting's no good without patience. You'll need allies, proof, and timing." Proof. That word rang through me like a bell. For months I had felt things shifting. Documents, misplaced phone calls, unanswered investments, redirected. Somewhere in all of that chaos lay evidence of their scheme. And if I could find it, I could burn their lies to ash. But first I had to watch. For 3 days, Jake let me stay in a spare room above his boathouse. He brought newspapers, and I read every line until I found it, a brief article buried in the business section. "Tragic accident claims heiress Margaret Harrison during family yacht outing." My face stared back at me, pale in an old stock photo, a caption naming me the late matriarch. Dead, officially. My son had signed the statement himself. The words were knives, but they carved me into steel. If the world believed I was gone, I had freedom to move unseen. On the fourth night, Tyler slipped into the kitchen, his voice hushed. "Mrs. Harrison." They posted pictures. "Your son and his wife, they're hosting a gala tomorrow night, a memorial." "A memorial," I whispered. He nodded, holding out his phone. And there it was. Vanessa in a black dress, tearful but stunning, David at her side with his hand resting protectively on her back. The caption read, "Honoring Margaret Harrison's legacy by continuing her vision for Harrison Global." I gripped the counter to steady myself, continuing my vision. "They killed me, and now they're wearing my name like a crown." Jake appeared behind Tyler, his expression dark. "Then maybe it's time you saw how they mourn." That was how the next evening, cloaked in a plain black coat and a borrowed scarf, I found myself standing outside the gilded ballroom of the Harrison Global headquarters. Through tall windows I could see chandeliers glittering here, laughter rising over the string quartet. My son and daughter-in-law glided through the room like royalty, accepting condolences, shaking hands, their faces masks of noble grief. I stepped closer to the glass, my reflection faint in the polished surface. For a moment I saw myself as they wanted the world to see me gone, erased, a ghost. But then I looked harder, past the lies, and saw the truth, an old woman who had survived the sea, who had been cast away by her own blood, and yet still stood. They had no idea I was watching, no idea that the woman they had written off as dead was alive, plotting, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I whispered to my reflection, to the woman I refused to bury, "You will not erase me. I will erase you." And in that vow, I felt Robert's presence beside me, steady as the tide. I stood in the shadow of our headquarters and watched my name drift across the marble, like smoke engraved on placards printed on programs toasted in crystal, as if reverence could replace a heartbeat. I pressed my palm to the cold glass, feeling the old ache of loss tighten across my ribs. And then I did what I had come to do. I moved. A widow learns which doors look dignified and which doors open. Jake had studied the service blueprints years ago when a cousin did maintenance here. He sketched them for me on a bait-stained napkin, his finger tracing ducts and stairwells, while Tyler committed them to memory like a video game map. I slipped around the corner past valet lights and murmured condolences, and slid into the alley where deliveries came at dawn. A swing of a rusted handle, a sigh of a hinged steel door, the familiar industrial breath of the building, exhaling Freon coffee copy toner. It smelled like the years I spent keeping Robert's empire upright when grief tried to tilt it. "Ma'am," a soft voice stopped me. I turned, heart leaping, ready to run, and saw Elaine Cho. Elaine had been Robert's general counsel, the woman with a mind like a hinge, clean, precise, unbreakable. David had reorganized her into a consultancy 6 months ago. She hadn't returned my calls since. Now she stood in a narrow strip of fluorescent light, her silver hair pulled back, her eyes taking me in without surprise. "You're dead," she said, and in her mouth the sentence was not shock. It was a case summary. I answered, until I wasn't. For a breath that felt like a century, we stared at each other. Then something softened around her mouth. She stepped aside. "Come, quickly." We moved through the service corridor like contraband. I was suddenly aware of my age, my hip ached, my breath snagged. Elaine kept pace without touching me, and I loved her for that. In the freight elevator, she pressed a code I had never known. "They filed the petition," she said. "Incompetency, power of attorney to David and Vanessa. The memorial gala is publicity cover. Tomorrow morning they sign an agreement to sell 49% to Helix Maritime, at a valuation lower than your charity endowment." "They'll strip it," I whispered, "then flip it. Like an old house with your family still inside," she murmured. The elevator opened on the legal archives, rows of gray compactors, and a room that always felt colder than it should. Elaine's heels were silent on the concrete. She walked straight to a wall panel, pressed her palm to a sensor that should have been disabled, then rapped twice on the frame. The panel clicked. She slid it aside, revealing a hand-length crawl of darkness that smelled faintly of cedar and thyme. "Robert's insurance," she said. "He called it the lighthouse. He never told David. He told me to tell you only if the sky turned a color we didn't recognize." My throat tightened. In the dark cavity lay a red leather folio with the word Caravel stamped in gold. My fingers shook as I lifted it. The leather was warm from the sleeping heat of the building. Inside, certified copies, notarized directives, a small black USB, and a single handwritten card in Robert's narrow, careful script. "If they declare you gone, the water will remember. Use the phrase." I swallowed. "What phrase?" Elaine pointed to the bottom of the card. In Latin, a line Robert loved to recite when he thought no one was listening: "Aqua meminit." The water remembers. "What does it unlock?" I asked. "Control." Elaine's voice was steady. 15 years ago, after the first time David tried to outvote you on a charity board, Robert created the Lighthouse Trust, a failsafe. If a death certificate for you is filed, voting rights shift to a guardian trustee, unless the guardian challenges within 72 hours, using a phrase only you would know. The trustee is you, a ghost of a smile. Alive, you reclaim control immediately and freeze all transfers. Dead, control goes to your foundation and the board Robert stacked with people who don't care about yachts. I felt the floor steady beneath me. "How long?" "Since the petition, 46 hours. They filed your death with a private registrar to hurry the probate motion. We're halfway through the window." She glanced at her watch. "If we lodge the challenge before dawn, we freeze Helix. But we'll need proof you're breathing, not just breathing rage." She tilted her head. "Can you breathe, Margaret?" I laughed, a cracked, salt-tanged sound. I drowned. Then I learned. We moved again. Elaine led me not to the executive floor, but to the server room where the building's heart hummed like a hive. She slotted the USB into a service terminal. The screen blinked, And then Robert's face filled the monitor Graney recorded in his office at twilight, tie-loosened eyes kind and so tired. The room tilted. My knees almost went. "Margaret," he said. It wasn't a message, it was a benediction. "If you're seeing this, I failed to tell you a hard thing in time. Our son loves speed more than bridges. Vanessa loves mirrors more than people. I have built a lockbox against their worst impulses. If they ever pretend you're gone, say the words and let the lighthouse flare. Forgive me for making you carry this burden again." He hesitated, then smiled the small crooked smile that made me fall in love in a cafeteria 50 years ago. The water remembers. So do I. The video ended. I stood with my palms pressed to the cold edge of the console and cried without sound. Elaine rested a folder on the rack beside me, a clean towel in a storm. "There's more," she said softly. "The doctor they paid Kellerman, he's on retainer to Helix. Vanessa's brother sits on Helix's advisory board under an alias. And David altered your living trust 3 weeks ago. He forged your signature." I closed my eyes. The betrayal wasn't a wound anymore, it was a map. "We bring it into daylight," I said. "All of it, with your help." "With every bit of mine," she said. "But we'll need one more thing, a witness no one expects. Someone who can swear where you were when they tried to drown you, and who has nothing to gain by lying." "Jake," I said, "and Tyler." Elaine nodded once. "Call them. Then we go to the registrar tonight. We say the phrase, we lodge the challenge, and we file an injunction at dawn. After that, we walk into your memorial." I blinked. "Walk into your memorial," she repeated. "Alive." Fear pricked old animal honest, but under it ran a current I hadn't felt since the days I kept payroll afloat with a pen and a prayer. Not rage, not even revenge, clarity. We slipped back into the service corridor. Before we reached the freight elevator, voices drifted a laugh I knew like a cut Vanessa's. I peered through the slit window. She stood with David in the catering prep area back to me, her gown a sheet of night, his tuxedo immaculate. He poured champagne into 2 flutes and clinked them softly. "To tomorrow," she said, "to Helix." "To 3 billion," he answered, not looking at her. She touched his cheek, "to being free of ghosts." Something sharp and winter cold steadied inside me. I stepped back from the window and took Elaine's arm. "Let's haunt them." On the loading dock, night air slapped my face awake. I called Jake. He answered on the first ring. "We're ready," he said simply. Tyler whooped in the background. "Grandma Shark, right?" I laughed, the sound strange and bright in my mouth. "Right." Elaine hailed a car. As the driver pulled away from the curb, the building shrank in the rear window, its facade all clean lines and honest light. Inside, my son and the woman he chose were drinking to my death. Outside, the city bent around me like a harbor, and somewhere offshore, the tide was turning as it does, as it always will. We drove toward the registrar's office, a squat building that held more power than any ballroom. And I whispered Robert's phrase once, like a prayer, tasting the salt of the word on my tongue. "Aqua meminit," I said into the night. "The water remembers, and so do I." The registrar's office sat quiet at 2 in the morning, a block of stone and glass surrounded by sleeping trees. Inside, the night clerk glanced up from his crossword with the sluggish suspicion of someone who rarely sees anyone after midnight. Elaine flashed her credentials and whispered something about probate emergency. His eyes widened, and suddenly we were inside the archive room with the lights buzzing overhead. I laid Robert's folio on the counter. My fingers traced the red leather as if it were skin. "This is it," I said softly. "Everything they tried to erase." Elaine nodded. "Say the phrase." I inhaled, my lungs aching with both fear and defiance. "Aqua meminit," I whispered. "The water remembers." The clerk keyed in a code, then pressed his palm to the scanner. The screen blinked, trusty authentication override engaged. Beneficiary challenge lodged. A sound like a lock sliding echoed through the room. The Lighthouse Trust, dormant for over a decade, had awakened. Elaine exhaled. "It's done. Helix can't touch a cent until the challenge is resolved. They'll find out when their lawyers arrive at 9 a.m. 9 a.m. In just a few hours, the gala would still be echoing the champagne, still sticky on the marble, when David and Vanessa learned the empire they thought they'd stolen had slipped back through their fingers. But it wasn't enough. My bones hummed with the need for more, not just to freeze their scheme, but to expose it. to rip their mask away in front of the world. "We go to the memorial," I said, alive. Elaine's eyes glinted. That was always the plan. By dawn, Jake and Tyler had arrived in a battered pickup that smelled of fish and motor oil. Tyler nearly bounced out of the passenger side, eyes wide at the city skyline. "Mrs. Harrison," he grinned, ready to scare the rich, ready to tell the truth. I corrected gently, though, a smile tugged at my mouth. Jake handed me a clean windbreaker and a baseball cap. "Not much for disguises, but it'll get you through the lobby. Once you're inside, the story itself will do the rest." We rehearsed in the parking lot, our breaths fogging in the cool morning air. Elaine outlined the legal points. Jake promised to swear how he'd pulled me from the ocean, and Tyler practiced holding the USB drive like it was a sword. I hadn't felt such solidarity since Robert's boardroom wars, when loyalty wasn't about blood, but about courage. By mid-morning, Harrison Global's ballroom was filled again, this time not with condolences, but with press. Reporters crowded the velvet ropes, their cameras flashing at David and Vanessa as they stepped onto the stage. A giant portrait of me loomed behind them, my face softened with a golden filter, as if death had already blurred me into myth. Vanessa adjusted the microphone, her black veil a perfect prop. "We are gathered today not only to mourn Margaret Harrison, but to honor her legacy. Harrison Global will thrive under our stewardship, just as she would have wanted." The doors swung open. I walked in. For a moment, silence drowned the room. Cameras froze, mid-flash forks clattered against plates. David's face drained of color. Vanessa's smile cracked like porcelain. "I don't recall wanting you to speak for me," I said, my voice steady, amplified not by microphones but by shock itself. Gasps rippled like wind through tall grass. A reporter shouted, "She's alive," and suddenly the ballroom erupted with the crackle of shutters, the thrum of disbelief. David staggered forward, hands raised as if to block the sight of me. "Mother, this isn't possible. You drowned." We searched." "You watched," I corrected. "You signed the papers. You drank to my death while I swallowed seawater." I lifted the folio high, the red leather gleaming under the chandeliers. But the water remembered me. And now so will you. Elaine stepped to my side, her voice sharp and cutting. "For the record, the Lighthouse Trust has been reactivated. All transfers are frozen. Any signatures filed in the past week are under investigation." Jake pushed forward, rough and commanding, his fisherman's cap in his hand. "I pulled this woman out of the ocean with my own two hands. If you say she's dead, then I reckon I'm a ghost too." Tyler raised the USB like a trophy. "And this has everything you tried to bury: doctors on payroll, bank accounts in false names, a forged signature on her living trust. The world's gonna see it all." Vanessa's face twisted, her voice shrill. "This is insanity. She's delusional. Look at her." Reporters surged closer, microphones thrust like bayonets. "Mrs. Harrison, did your son and daughter-in-law try to murder you?" I let the question hang, my eyes locking on David's pale face. "Yes," I said finally. "They pushed me overboard. They tried to erase me for money, but I am not so easily erased." The room exploded, cameras, flashing voices shouting the sound of truth, cracking open a shell of lies. David tried to lunge for the microphone, but security intercepted him. Vanessa shrieked about conspiracies, her words drowned by the tidal wave of noise. And me, I stood taller than I had in years, the storm raging around me, but not through me. I had come back from the water. I had come back from death itself, and I would not be silenced again. Chaos erupted in the ballroom. Reporters shouted questions, camera flashes blinded, and the crowd split like the sea itself. I stood in the center, a living contradiction, dead on paper, yet breathing unshakable. David's mouth opened and closed like a man gasping for air, while Vanessa clawed at his arm, her voice shrill. "Stop them! Shut her up before—" Security moved forward, but Elaine held up her badge and barked, "This is now a matter of federal jurisdiction." Her voice sliced the air like a gavel. The guards hesitated. That moment was all I needed. I turned to the cameras, my voice ringing clear. They plotted to erase me. My own son and his wife. They forged my signature, bribed doctors, filed me dead before the sea had finished with me, all for money that was never theirs. The room buzzed like a hive kicked open. I held up the folio, its leather gleaming. "This is proof, not only of my life, but of their lies." Elaine leaned close, whispering, "Hold them steady, Margaret. Law enforcement is on the way." But Vanessa, sharp as a serpent, struck first. She snatched the microphone and screamed into it, "This woman is unstable. Look at her raving like a lunatic. She drowned and this is some imposter they've dragged in to ruin us." Reporters surged forward with more questions, but Jake's voice boomed over them all. "Imposter. I pulled her out myself. She was coughing seawater on my deck, half dead from the stunt you pulled." Tyler waved the USB, his teenage voice cracking but strong. "And I've got the recordings to prove it. Calls, payments, fake doctors, it's all here." For the first time, I saw Vanessa falter. Her eyes darted to David, who stood frozen, pale and sweating. His hands shook as if the blood that tied us had turned to ice. "David," I said softly, though the microphone carried it across the room, "you could have come to me. You could have asked. But instead you chose to kill your own mother." His eyes flickered with something shame-rage I couldn't tell, but he said nothing. The ballroom doors burst open. Officers in dark uniforms surged in, followed by federal agents with their badges held high. The crowd gasped, phones lifted, live streams flashing. Two agents moved straight to me, confirming my identity with a quick scan of the trust documents. Then they turned to David and Vanessa. "David Harrison, Vanessa Harrison, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted murder, and falsification of legal documents." Gasps scattered like sparks. Reporters pressed closer, their cameras devouring every second. Vanessa shrieked, thrashing as the agents cuffed her. "You can't do this. We're the victims. She's the crazy one." David didn't resist. He simply lowered his head as the cuffs closed around his wrists. For a moment, I almost saw the little boy who once clung to my hand on the first day of school. But then I remembered the weight of the ocean pressing me down, his face watching from the yacht as Vanessa declared me drowned. That boy was long gone. As they were led away, reporters turned their mics back to me. "Mrs. Harrison, what will happen to the company now? Do you plan to press further charges? How does it feel to be betrayed by your own family?" I steadied myself. "It feels like drowning," I said, voice trembling but true. "But the water teaches you something. It teaches you that breath is precious and that survival is a choice. I chose to survive, and I will make sure no one else ever drowns in their lies again." Applause broke out, not polite but fierce, defiant. For a moment I stood there overwhelmed until Elaine's hand closed gently around mine. "It's over," she whispered. But as the agents led David and Vanessa out, Vanessa twisted her head toward me, her voice low but venomous. "It's not over. You don't know what else we've buried." Her words chilled me even as the cameras caught her venom. Another secret, another scheme waiting beneath the surface. I straightened my spine. Whatever they had buried, I would find it. Because I was no longer the woman they had tried to erase, I was something stronger. When the ballroom finally emptied, I walked to the giant portrait of myself, the softened, sainted image they had used to sell their lie. I stared at it for a long moment, then tore it down. The canvas ripped like paper. The sound echoed in the silence, final and clean. "Aqua Meminit," I whispered, "the water remembers, and so will I." The days that followed felt like living inside an echo. Everywhere I went, whispers trailed behind me, the woman who came back from the dead, the mother betrayed by her own blood. Reporters camped outside the beach house, their cameras hungry for every flicker of expression, every whispered word. Elaine handled them with steel. Jake blocked them with silence. Tyler called them sharks with microphones. But in the quiet hours when the tide stretched thin and the house smelled faintly of coffee and salt, I faced the truth of what had happened. My son had chosen greed over love. Vanessa had sharpened him into a weapon, but the choice had been his. And no courtroom, no sentence, no press coverage could ever stitch shut that wound. One morning I sat at the kitchen table with the lighthouse folio open in front of me. Robert's handwriting stared back, steady as stone. "If they declare you gone, the water will remember." He had known. Somewhere deep in his bones, he had known what our son might become. And he had left me a torch to carry through the dark. Elaine entered quietly, placing a newspaper at my elbow. The headline screamed, "Harrison heirs arrested in 3B fraud plot." Beneath it, my face alive, unfiltered, resolute. "They'll face trial," Elaine said softly. "The evidence is airtight. The Lighthouse Trust will protect the company until the courts settle the rest." I nodded, though my heart felt heavier than the gavel that would one day fall. And what about me? I whispered. What does a woman do when her own child becomes her enemy? Elaine's eyes softened. She keeps living. She keeps building. Because surviving isn't enough, you have to turn survival into meaning. That evening, I walked along the shoreline alone. The water licked at my ankles, cold but strangely comforting. I thought of the moment I had fallen from the yacht, the way the sea had swallowed me whole. I thought of how certain they had been that I would never rise again. But I had. And now I realized it wasn't revenge that filled my chest, it was resolve. I would take Harrison Global and reshape it into something clean. I would invest in the very communities Vanessa and David had stripped. I would make sure the fortune they had tried to steal would instead build a world where betrayal could not thrive so easily. As the sun bled orange across the horizon, Jake and Tyler joined me, their laughter cutting through the wind. Tyler tossed a pebble into the waves, grinning. "Grandma Shark," he teased, "you beat them." I smiled, pulling the boy into a hug. "I didn't just beat them, Tyler, I outlasted them." And perhaps that is what survival really means, not just living through betrayal, but living beyond it. Weeks later, when the trial began, I did not sit in the front row. I didn't need to. The truth was no longer mine alone to carry, it belonged to the world now. I watched from a distance, then turned back to the work of rebuilding, not just a company, not just a name, but a life. To those of you watching this now, who have carried betrayal in your own bones, hear me. It does not define you. The lies, the wounds, the ones who turned against you, they do not get the last word. You do. Survival is not silence. Survival is testimony. I was shoved into the ocean by my own family, left for dead, over $3 billion. But the water remembered me. And now, so do you. If this story touched you, please like this video, share it with someone who may need strength, and subscribe for more stories of resilience. And tell me in the comments, have you ever survived something that tried to erase you? I want to hear your truth.